Now it's time to welcome Captain Nicholas Samuel to speak about his piece, Gift of Love. Well, Nick, thank you ever so much for joining us on Fully Scored. It's great to have you joining us all the way from Canada.
Thank you, Matthew. It's great to be with you, and it's an honour to be a guest on the show.
Thank you. And in today's episode, we're going to be looking through a piece that you wrote a little while ago called Gift of Love. So, as usual, I've got a few questions about the context of the piece, and then we'll delve into the score and have a look through the detail of the music and discover the message behind it also. So, my first question is, when did you come to write this piece? What was the inspiration behind it?
I believe this was around 2002, because I think the first time I heard it played through was because I just finished it before TMS and took it with me that week in the hope that whichever band I ended up in for that week would give it a run through so I could hear it in person. So I think that was the summer of 2002. But it started out really just as an experiment because it comes from my love of playing the piano for congregational singing and the way that various songs develop as you accompany them. And so this one started out as an experiment to see if there were a set of songs that came together as a selection that recognized the enormity of God's gift of love to us in Jesus Christ, and pairing with that our response. And so this is what came out of that. And so it's a whole selection of songs put together that literally deals with the story of Jesus and our response to that.
Fantastic. And that fits really appropriately. We're releasing this episode on Good Friday in 2022. So could you tell us a little bit more about the message behind this music and the tunes and the songs that you've used to encapsulate and take the listener on that journey?
Sure. I think as we analyze the score, we'll figure out which songs come at which point. But it begins with the statement of King of my life, I crown thee now in the horn section, and then develops through. And there's various quotes that come into the introduction as well. And then we move into Matt Redman's song Once Again as the main centerpiece to get people started on that story of Jesus Christ, I think upon your sacrifice. And then that second verse that talks about now you're exalted in the highest place. And then we move into our response, because that's followed by, may I be willing, Lord, to bear daily my cross for thee, even the cup of grief to share, thou hast borne all for me. Lest I forget Gethsemane, thine agony and thy love for me lead me to Calvary. And then there's a song by Jeff Baker. Only the second half of the first verse is used. It says, amazing mystery that he should die for me as a perfect sacrifice on the cross. That's love incarnate on the cross. And then a recap of the Matt Redman song before the conclusion that brings it all together. It says, I bring thee all. Oh, give thyself to me. I bring thee all. And so that kind of encapsulates the whole piece in one go when we recognize, again, that story of Jesus, where we're reminded in John's gospel that God so loved the world. That's you and me. God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, so that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. And so it really is up to us how we respond to that. So my hope is that through this piece of music, Gift of Love, there is a framework for us to look at that says, this is how I need to respond. When I say, I bring my all, yes, Lord, I want to be part of this.
Powerful music, but an even more powerful message behind the music there then. So I think this would be a good time to dip into the score. And could you talk us through this introduction here that introduces a few of those themes that you've just talked about up to letter A?
Certainly. The introduction to this is kind of setting the scene in a very picturesque way, because I would dare to say that for a band that's going to play this, their solo horn and flugelhorn player are thinking, oh no, it's just us. And So at the beginning, it's a bit of an open start for those two people, and a bit more ensemble joins in. But the key thing happens at bar 3. Having heard King of my life, I crown thee now. There's a sudden change of key. Not that we put a key change in there, but we move from the original E flat major. Bar 3, all of a sudden we find ourselves hit with this C major 9 chord, and with the cornets and the baritones moving around in those quavers. I can say quavers in this episode because I don't have to say 8th notes to all the Canadians. I can use the proper names. So here, when we get these quavers moving around in the solo cornets and baritones, there's a very ethereal picture with perhaps this very sparkling, regal idea as we see this king motif of Jesus crowned in glory. And that repeats again, but this time in bar 6 with a D flat major 9 chord. So again, after thine shall be the glory be, coming from the solo horn and flugel, it grows again to this D flat major 9 chord, and more of this sparkling imagery of perhaps a picture of heaven. Sometimes when we're talking about heaven, when I'm speaking from the platform, I've occasionally said to people that what we understand of heaven from scriptures is told to us mostly from John's revelation, where we create all these pictures. And John could only use the words that human beings could understand. And so if we get to heaven and find out that it's even better than that, don't be disappointed and complain. Enjoy it. And so again, this small picture of heaven in those separated 2 sets of 2 bars, it's a mere attempt of portraying something ethereal and glorious. So if it turns out to be better than that on the day, don't be disappointed.
Fantastic. And that pretty much sort of takes us to about 4 bars before A, where we have the first iteration of the tune, contemporary worship tune, Jesus Christ.
Yes. So just before A, as we get to the end of this verse of Jenny Hussey's song, Lead Me to Calvary, are these short snippet quotes where the solo cornets and first cornets are played, Lead Me to Calvary, and then the flugelhorn plays twice, How Marvelous, How Wonderful, from that other great song. And then randomly thrown in from the soprano cornet player is just this simple reminder for 2 bars of thank you for saving me, which takes us into letter A that tells us how that happened. Jesus Christ, I think upon your sacrifice. I'm sure many of us know the words to that particular verse. And musically, it's a very, very simple setting. The reason is that the words are so important, we don't want to distract from that. And so it's mostly in the solo horn, and then partway through it gets picked up with the first cornet as well, just as the ensemble starts to build towards the chorus.
So that takes us into letter B, where we see the chorus of that tune and the harmonies and the texture thicken out a little bit. Can you talk us through this section?
Yeah, so as we come to the chorus, I think musically, typically we expect that the verse would be thinner scoring, and then the chorus, everybody joins in, because that's what people have tended to do with the old sing-alongs. But the rationale here is very similar to that. It brings everybody into that. But if we look at the words, we also see that the first 3 words are, and once again, I look upon the cross where you died. I'm humbled by your mercy and I'm broken inside. Once again, I thank you. Once again, I pour out my life. And so here, as we invite everybody in, there's also a recognition that this is a story that we remind ourselves of, if not once a year at Easter, but hopefully throughout the year. And there's a danger that it becomes, yeah, okay, this happened, now what? And so just to boost the scoring slightly and to bring everybody into that, it's a reminder that once again, we come back to this story, but let's not forget how important it is, and that everybody's included in that invitation to come and find out what it's all about for us. And as we get to the end of that chorus that says, once again, I pour out my life, it's the trombones this time that take up that little 2-bar motif of thank you for saving me. And then following that, the last 2 bars before C, the cornets and euphoniums pick up the the bridge part of Matt Redman's song that says, thank you for the cross, my friend. And that takes us into letter C for verse 2.
Fantastic. And a different treatment of this second verse here at C.
Yeah. I think the rationale for me musically was just to do something different that wasn't the same as the first verse. Because if it's just a repeat, you think, well, what was the point in that? We could have saved 5 minutes. But really, if we get to the words of that, we've got now you are exalted to the highest place, King of the heavens, where one day I'll bow. We get to be part of that. But for now, while I'm still here on earth, I marvel at this saving grace, and I'm full of praise once again. It's been commented to me once or twice before, it's unusual that the first cornets actually get to play the tune all by themselves for a whole verse. And so that happens here through letter C with this second verse. And the accompaniment is between the tubas and the trombones with a typical euphonium counter melody just happening underneath that doesn't take anything away. It just adds to a bit of movement to keep things flowing along nicely. So letter C takes us to there, where at the end of that verse that says, I'm full of praise once again, there's a few more people joining in with the thank you for saving me motif. And then this time, there's a very brief introduction of the next song, On the Cross, from the soprano cornet. Underneath, in the horns and the baritones, is just a few notes reference to Thy Cross I Come, which was the Fred Fry song with a beautiful setting by Ivor Bosanko. So I've borrowed Ivor's few notes for there, just a reference. This is me coming to the cross here at this moment.
And a really clever little link there between the two tunes and those references. So at letter D, we have our next tune, Lead Me to Calvary. Could you talk us through the words that you're associating here and a little bit through the music in this section?
This is one of those moments where everything is very simplified. It's taken right back to the bare bones. And we end up with what's almost just a quartet for the first few bars. In terms of notes on paper, there might be a few more players in the band on the day. But at letter D, we end up with the euphonium playing the melody for the first 4 bars with just the tubas and 2 horns. And then there's a sustained solo cornet note over the top. And this is the final verse of Lead Me to Calvary, that song that says, May I be willing, Lord, to bear daily my cross for thee, even the cup of grief to share, for thou hast borne all for me. And again, this is one of those moments where I've purposely kept it right down to the absolute basics so that we don't make it all fancy and think, wow, the music was great, and then forget all about the importance of the words. Because the important part is here, recognizing, Lord, I want to be part of this. Help me to be faithful. May I be willing, Lord, to bear my cross for thee. And so in those first 4 bars, and it starts to build a bit more in the bars 5 to 8, where the first cornets take over the melody again, and the euphonium puts in that bit of counter melody underneath, keeping it very, very, very simple right the way through, even into letter E, again, keeping it so simple with just the 3 parts thrown in of the sustained bass line at letter E and a 2-part melody in the baritones and trombones, with that, again, the sustained solo cornet line over the top with the semi-breves over those 4 bars. There's nothing fancy whatsoever in there musically, because the importance is, lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thine agony, lest I forget thy love to me, lead me to Calvary. And so I think for me, what is the center of this piece of music happens in the fortissimo at bar 62. Lest I forget thy love to me, lead me to Calvary. The whole band comes in, and the chords are probably not what people are expecting with that particular melody, because they're a little more complex than the original in the tune book. And that's simply just to make people sit up and think, oh, wow, I need to remember this bit. And it's, lest I forget thy love to me, lead me to Calvary.
And after we've had that glorious and climactic moment, that takes us to letter F, where, as you mentioned earlier, we have just the second half of the chorus, on the cross.
The first verse says, on the cross where the King of Glory died, here is grace, here is love, flowing from that wounded side. Now, I didn't manage to quote the first half of that verse here in full, but I did use the second half that responds to that picture. And I didn't use it because it's already described in the previous songs. However, these next few lines that I did use say, amazing mystery that he should die for me as a perfect sacrifice on the cross, love incarnate on the cross. And this is just a beautiful melody that flows through with no complications at all. It's very singable, and I think that's why I included it, really. Apart from the words, it's just a very singable, brief moment of repose from the boldness of the previous statements through letter E. And that begins to take us to the key change section.
Absolutely, at letter G, where we see the chorus once again of Jesus Christ appearing here.
Yes. So in those 4 bars before G, we've got to the end of love incarnate on the cross. We get these repeated motifs of on the cross through the solo cornets and a couple of other places throughout. And this is the build in the key change where we go back to fortissimo at letter G, moving into G flat major. And we're confronted again with that reminder that once again, I look upon the cross where you died. I'm humbled by your mercy and I'm broken inside. Once again, I thank you. And once again, I pour out my life. And it's not a long chorus by any means, because it's only 6 bars long here, but it's such a wonderful reminder that once again, I'm back in this place, reminded of what it's all about. letter H, there's a remarkable contrast because we've diminuendoed through the bar before H with all this movement and excitement of the fortissimo and the movement of that chorus that we know well. And suddenly we find ourselves with pretty much 4 bars of semibreves apart from the melody. And that, again, is for the same reason as the previous occasions of a similar thing, where the importance is of the words that go with the melody. So let's not be distracted by that. And so these 4 bars of semibreves take us to I Bring Thee All, the Evangeline Booth song. Oh, give thyself to me, I bring thee all. I would dare to say that in the midst of the stillness of those few bars, that the 4th bar of H musically is the hardest bar of the whole piece to play, because there's only one note in it. And somehow you've got to make some kind of music in there that goes somewhere, but also that very practical thing of don't breathe in a crescendo. I know it's one of those things that the bandmaster always shouts, don't breathe in a crescendo, but there's a reality there that it needs to go somewhere. Don't break up that momentum. And so here, yes, that's probably the hardest bar in the whole piece, because you've got to the end of a 4-bar phrase. Naturally, when we're looking at the lyrics, we think, oh, there's a comma there. I'm going to breathe and go for the forte that comes up. But no, we can't do that, because it's got to go somewhere to make it carry over from I bring thee all to, oh, give thyself to me, I bring thee all, and make that forte go somewhere with a big round sound. Nothing forced, but make it go somewhere with a big round sound.
In the last and final few bars of the piece, we have this very prayerful conclusion that takes us to a moment of real stillness, and all the music and all the movement settles onto this final pianissimo chord.
Yeah, so we've had all the excitement of the fortissimos and the fortes, and in particular that crescendo to the forte in the 5th bar of H, and we maintain that forte for the next 3 bars, and then when we get to the another 2 bars of semibreves, we decrescendo. And here again we go right back to that stillness, where in the place of amazement, it's like that story in the Old Testament where we're reminded that Elijah is in the cave, and there's all the busyness and the lightning and everything else happening around him. And we're reminded the Lord was not in the earthquake. He was not in the fire. He wasn't in the fireworks of all the stuff of what was going around us. But we find him in that quiet moment of, oh. And so here, where we come down to that piano, the Lord is in the stillness. And we find ourselves back in that place where there's just 4 bars of semibreves. But underneath that, the trombones have got this motif from Don Moen's song that says, no greater love than this. And they repeat that again as a reminder, no greater love than this. At which point it comes to a conclusion. And in that stillness, the pianissimo final chord is that place where we meet with Christ, where we've come to that conclusion and we've recognized for ourselves that, yes, I've been through all the excitement of singing all the songs, but now I've got to put it into real action, into real life. What does it mean for tomorrow? What does it mean on the Monday after Easter Sunday? And hopefully we go ahead with the same intention of the promises we made the previous day. And hopefully we go ahead with the same amazement that we explored the previous day as we saw the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and the fact that it is all God's gift of love for every one of us.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you ever so much for sharing and exploring that message with us, that message that we see at Easter, but as you said, applies for every single day of the year as well. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks, Nick, for taking us through that meditative work and for exploring the accompanying message further.